Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's APA Live event. I'm Amy Ferrer. I'm the Executive Director of the American Philosophical Association. Today's event is titled Grad School Application Decisions, Advice and Experience from Philosophy Grad Students. And it's been organized by the APA Graduate Student Council and the Philosophy Graduate Applicants Facebook group. So thanks very much to the organizers for putting this together. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our facilitator, Eli Benjamin Israel. Eli.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to do this at such a decisive time for some of you. So as Amy was saying, my name is Eli. I'm a third-year PhD student at Temple, and I'm also a member of the APA's Graduate Student Council. For me, I remember the graduate application season to be one of the most stressful times for me in academia, at least so far. I found in the philosophy graduate applicants Facebook group a very supportive community already back then. I'm happy to see how it continues with its wonderful admins. But still, I found that for me, in my specific situations as an international student coming to the US with a family, I felt like I didn't have the right tools to make the most informed decision. And I figured it out at some point, but I had to sweat my way into figuring out how to solve the equation of where to go. So for this season, as being part of the GSC, I thought it would be a good idea to create an opportunity for the community of prospective grad students in philosophy to help each other out, answer each other's questions, give advice. And that's what we're doing today. So our panelists are all graduate students, starting from Paul J. Kelly from University of Wisconsin, Rachel Dichter from Notre Dame, and myself, who are members of the GSC. And joining us are also Shane Henckel from UMass and Linds Whittaker from University of Washington, the administrators of the Facebook group. So we'll divide the next hour in the following way. So first, I'll hand it over to Paul, who is also the vice chair of the GSC. Paul will tell us a little bit about the GSC and how the APA can benefit graduate students. Then we'll have a very short round between the panelists where each one of us will give some personal insights into the process of deciding where to go to grad school and about the graduate student experience in general. And after that, we'll get to the most significant part of this event, hopefully, where we'll hand it over to the audience. I want to have an opportunity to actually answer the questions that are more burning to you guys. So we'll have a very large Q&A, about 30 minutes. The Q&A will happen through the chat. I'll be reading your questions, and so you can address them to specific people or to the whole panel. If you think that, if you'd like that question not to be asked in your name, you can just tell me on the chat to ask it anonymously. And I think that's all. So I think we can start. Paul, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction. Can everybody hear me? All right, I'm coming through okay? Okay, great. So yeah, my name is Paul J. Kelly. I am I guess now a 7th year at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Prior to coming to Madison, I was at Indiana in the HPS program, History and Philosophy of Science. And prior to that, I was at Tufts for their master's program in philosophy. So I've done the grad application cycle multiple times in multiple periods of my academic career. So hopefully I can provide some helpful feedback for people who are doing it for the first time or maybe the second time. So in addition to being just a grad student at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I'm also on the GSC, the Graduate Student Council. And the Graduate Student Council is part of the APA, which is helping run this particular event. And I think that the APA has been extremely helpful in my time as a grad student, giving me lots of different opportunities for service work. So not only if you get actively involved with the Graduate Student Council can you put down on your CV that you've been actively involved, But also it opens up various doors for being involved with the annual conferences that the APA runs, the Eastern and the Central and the Pacific. The APA also, a fairly recent development in the last few years, has these things at their annual conferences called teaching hubs, which are jointly sponsored by the APA and also the AAPT, the American Association of Philosophy Teachers. And if you're on the Graduate Student Council, the APA and the AAPT will reach out to you to be actively involved in organizing these sessions. And if you're attending them, also chairing them. And these conferences and these organizing opportunities give you really good opportunities to interact with professional philosophers, to network at these conferences with people who are in your area of specialization. And so I strongly encourage you, even if this is very early on in your graduate career, to consider becoming involved with the Graduate Student Council and the APA writ large. Also, just the Grad Student Council in general is a great opportunity to advocate for graduate students. So it's a very open-ended, very open group where if you come into the group with particular ideas in mind for projects, ways that the APA or philosophy as a profession in general could function better in a more ethical or equitable way, you can propose those projects, and the Grad Student Council can develop proposals and pitch them to the APA board and actually change policy. So if you have ideas for ways that the discipline could function better, maybe as your grad school career develops, there are things that create friction in your department or in the discipline writ large that you think should be different, the Grad Student Council is a great way to advocate for things being different and actually changing things. I guess the other thing that I would like to mention is that conference presentations are important. They're important for you developing your ideas and networking and getting feedback. And if you're a grad student and you submit to these conferences and you get accepted, the APA has travel funding available that could help defer some of the costs. A lot of these different programs, which I imagine we'll talk about this week, have different amounts of travel funding and different amounts of stipends that they give you. And so the APA, as a national organization who helps run these conferences, is committed, amongst other things, to helping grad students get these kinds of experiences at these conferences. So I think those are all the points I was thinking about. The Grad Student Council is a good organization. If you're an early grad student, I would encourage you to apply to it and become actively involved with the profession writ large with the APA as a national organization. So, Ellie, does that sound good?
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. So wonderful. Thanks so much. It was very helpful. And I think now we can actually go back to the reason why we're all here, which is the application cycle and how we can help you perhaps make your decisions better, or at least in a way that you can feel better about them. So I'll do a very quick round between the panelists. Perhaps I'll start and then I'll just call the rest of you by the order I see here. So I have just two brief notes, things that I find important to remark, but I think that they might be important for some of you. Before them, as I said, I'm a philosophy student who also is a full-time father while being in grad school. That's a difficult task and adds all different kinds of considerations to your grad school decisions. So if you have any questions that have to do with that, if that's part of your experience, feel free to ask me those during the Q&A or after on email. Same about like being an international grad student. Now about my point. So first, I think that graduate school is very much about what you make out of it and how you can engage with your environment in ways that make you a better and more successful philosopher, perhaps. So as you all know, the job market is extremely hard, and I'm being very mild here, and the demand just become higher and higher. So chances of most of us to actually get jobs are not great. Doesn't matter if we are at NYU or in a less prestige school. And for this reason exactly, I think that considerations like placement records or the ranking of a program at the PGR are important, of course, to some extent, perhaps to the stage where you're defining where to apply to, but I think they're not the most important ones right now as you're trying to make the very hard decision between the offers that you got, hopefully, if you got more than one offer. Instead, I think you should be focusing much more on the questions surrounding the status of the program. So from the academic side, what's the level of engagement of faculty with grad students? How is the department's atmosphere? How is the department in terms of budget to conferences? Paul was mentioning how important are conferences for grad students. So how they can make actually your experience as a graduate student and as a philosopher more enriching. And also from a personal side, how can you make your years in grad school pleasant for you? How can you be happy in grad school? Which seems to be something weird to consider, but considering that it will be at least like 5 years of your life, I believe you'd like to be happy for like 5 years. So considerations like, do you want to live in the city where the university is? Would you have a supportive community over there? Can you afford it, most of all? If you're not happy, if you're not healthy physically and mentally, if you're not able to not just meet your basic needs, but also have your hobbies as you'd like them to happen. If you're not happy in grad school, it will be very hard for you to finish. And those are things that you should consider already in this stage. My second point is more practical, I think. And I want to advise you to take advantage of the next 2 weeks before April 15th to ask the DGS, the faculty, and the grad students, the programs that you were accepted to, all those questions that you are afraid to ask or that you think that might sound unprofessional. So if you have a family and you want to ask about work-life balance, ask it. If you have a health condition, or if you're a health minority of some sort and you want to know how they would accept it in the university or in the department, ask those things. I at least was very much afraid of asking any non-philosophical questions at that point. And then I found myself with a very blurred vision of what my life would be coming to a specific department. I also figure out that if you ask unusual questions or more like exposed questions, you usually get more sincere answers. So yeah, that will be my practical advice. I think I'll call next Linds to join in.
Sounds good. Good morning, folks. My name is Linds Whittaker. I'm a 6th year over here at the University of Washington. Prior to that, I was over at Virginia Tech for my MA, and then I was at the University of Vermont for undergrad. So much like Paul, I've also been through a few cycles of application season things. And then for folks that are on the Facebook group, you sometimes probably see me doing some data analytics and then also running some spreadsheet stuff for the proactive application stuff. So when we think about some of the things that came up for me when I was applying, I guess the main points that I would like to raise in this space is one, regardless of whether or not you got a few offers, a lot of offers, you're on the waitlist for your favorite school, or like a few applicants a few years ago, maybe it's all waitlist right now. Remember that how these things end up kind of coming to an end is not going to be representative of your competency and your ability as a philosopher. A lot of the different elements within the application seasons and cycles, it is arbitrary for better or worse. It depends on who was on the admittance committee for that year for a given like university or a given department. Sometimes it's going to be arbitrary of who decided to read your writing sample. For example, one year my writing sample, which was on pet food, got read by the person who was a vegetarian. I think if somebody else in the department had ended up getting it, might have had a slightly different outcome. So when we think about some of these different metrics and the ways in which we as sometimes a discipline see our work reflected in whether or not we're being successful in an application season or whether or not we're being successful in the application we made for a specific school, I really would like to kind of invite us to reflect on it. That isn't necessarily representative of who we are as people or our competencies as philosophers. There's a lot of other really weird arbitrary stuff that can happen. And you can still, absolutely make it in the profession. You absolutely can get into in this cycle or next cycle. And there's been plenty of folks that have had to go through a few different cycles. And I have the data to back that up if anybody wants to talk data. The other thing that I would like to flag before I'm kind of passing along to our next panelists is when we think about some of these well-being components, which is what I've already heard some panelists bring up, sometimes it's also going to be asking about the questions where even if you're afraid to ask them, they can be really meaningful for your life. So for example, and I heard some medical stuff come up earlier, if you're somebody who needs access to specific types of medical things, is it covered by your school's health insurance? If the answer is no, that might end up looking really different, and it might really impact your ability to flourish in that space and your ability to flourish over the next 2 years of a graduate program. Likewise, is there an on-site health department for your university? So for example, University of Washington has Hall Health. I think Virginia Tech was also called Hall Health. Might be that most of them are, not quite sure. But are you actually able to go to that pharmacy or able to go to that place on campus in order to receive medical care? And this can include also folks that might have families. So when I think about some of the salient pieces, it's thinking about some of those holistic components and how those can really be impactful for folks when they're trying to transition into a new space, into a new department, into a new city, and how that can also set folks up for success, especially if something was to come up. Because plenty of times, hopefully nothing will come up. But if it were, would you be in a really good space to be able to get that care, to get that support, and also to be supported by your department? So thinking of some questions, what do absences and leaves look like for departments? Because as much as we would like to assume that the best is always going to happen, also talking and asking those difficult questions of when folks have had to step away, what does support look like, or what does it not look like? To be able to sometimes flag those opportunities for departments to also amend, rectify, and switch over some of their policies and practices, which is some of the stuff that Paul had also mentioned, getting us a little bit better as a discipline on the whole. And then the last thing that I would like to flag, so while I'm here as a PhD student in the Department of Philosophy, I also work for emergency management for the University of Washington. So I actually have a full-time position that is not within philosophy. I do res life, I do emergency management. And for folks that might be on this call where you love philosophy and you're also interested in doing some other stuff some of the time, is your department going to accept that? And also, are they going to allow you to flourish in that? Is that something that is valued? Because sometimes the answer might be no. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Different departments will weigh different types of things as the elements that for them are really, really important, or things that they're really great at support with, or things that maybe they need to improve on a little bit. But can you find a department where you're going to be able to really strive for those things that bring you joy and bring you happiness, and also give you the space to do that exploration, with the understanding that a lot of us are here to write the great papers, to do the things, to do the research. And sometimes some of us are here because we love do the teaching and we love to see like the little light bulbs go on, but maybe research is not our forte, and that can also be okay. So when we think about some departments and decisions, especially for folks that maybe are looking for some non-academic opportunities, is it going to be a department that supports that? And how do we make sure that folks are getting links to those departments that can also allow them to flourish in ways that maybe are slightly atypical for philosophers, but still doesn't make us bad philosophers. This is a different type of thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Linds. Thanks so much. Next, I'll call in Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel Dichter. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Notre Dame. And I guess one defining feature of my own application process was that I took a gap year between my undergrad and applying to grad school, or I applied during the gap year, but I took a gap year between my undergrad and my first year of grad school. So if anyone happens to be in that particular situation, I'd be happy to answer questions about what that's like to be working while applying to grad school. I guess I would also just reemphasize what others have already said about lifestyle factors and the environment where you end up, perhaps that taking precedence over even PGR ranking. But yeah, those are my brief remarks. Thank you.
So thank you. Shane?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Shane Henckel. I'm a fifth-year PhD at UMass. I'm working on epistemic injustice and philosophical methodology. I previously got my master's at Brandeis, and I went to undergrad at UMass Boston. So when I was applying out of undergrad, I had no idea what I was doing, and my department there wasn't in a position to help me with that. I think I was the only person in my cohort that year who applied to philosophy grad school. And then the reason I'm here is because I've admin this Facebook group for philosophy graduate applicants since I was applying out of my master's, so what, 5-6 years now. And for me, it was just so important to have that, not only like people who could answer my questions, people who like knew about the process. Like I didn't even know what the PGR was when I started out, but also just having that community and that peer support. And that's what's been really important to me in kind of cultivating this space as an environment that is not like, even though we're all in some sense competing with each other, that it's more about like we're all in this together, we're all doing the same thing, we're all here for the same reasons. And yeah, I mean, I guess we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but one of just the most important pieces of advice I can give about this process is that, like, unfortunately, every year there's qualified applicants who don't get in anywhere. So not getting in or not getting in the programs you wanted, getting waitlisted, whatever, it doesn't say anything about your qualifications. And if you do get in places, that does mean you're qualified. So it's just a really competitive process. It's really hard. It's really stressful. But, you know, we're all here because we love philosophy, and I'm going to talk more about that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Now I'm going to finish with Paul.
Oh, yeah, so just some general comments, I guess, of things that people might already be thinking, but feel like should probably be mentioned about making this kind of big decision. As was mentioned, the job market for philosophy is difficult, to understate it. At the same time, though, there's been recent developments in getting accurate data about the job placement from these different programs. I've been involved with the grad school in this discipline for long enough before that data was really available. And needless to say, it made the decision significantly more difficult to try to make. It's not always the case that people that are going to grad school in philosophy have a particular academic job in mind as their sort of end goal. But I think the vast majority of people who do go to grad school in philosophy, especially PhDs in philosophy, have that as their objective. So insofar as that is your sort of long-term goal, being aware of the success rates of these different programs is really important. So Carolyn Dicey Jennings in the last few years has put together a lot of data in this project called the Academic Placement Data and Analysis, the APDA. And if you Google that, it'll come up. Other types of considerations, in addition to success of job placement, to keep in mind that are just sort of obvious. So what is the area of philosophy you're interested in? Several people have mentioned the diversity of their interests. Are there people at the program that are specialized in that area and, crucially, will be around for a decent amount of time? I've seen a lot of people start going to a program and then the one person that they were planning to have as their chair for their dissertation end up leaving or retiring. It's not too much to send emails to those particular faculty members and say, hey, I'm a potential incoming grad student. I'm interested in working with you. I'm interested in your work. Will you be around? It doesn't hurt to ask. Sometimes professors will email you. I've had professors email me when I've done the application cycle and say, hey, I saw your application. I just wanted to let you know I have no intention of retiring or leaving. Obviously, that's them going above and beyond. So don't feel hesitant to actually reach out to these people and let them know that you want to work with them. A decent number, I think, of campus visits have already taken place. Some others might be taking place in the next few weeks. I'm not so sure. Insofar as that's an opportunity for you, please take advantage of it if you can. Getting to actually be around other grad students that are in the program, both early grad students and later grad students, and being able to ask honest questions of them in person is an extremely valuable thing. It also can give you a sense of the sort of general climate of the department. Are there tensions between the grad students? Do they hang out with one another? Are there tensions between professors? Are there tensions between grad students and professors? Getting honest feedback from grad students who are in the programs that you're thinking of going to and are in many ways in a position that you're hoping to be in a few years is an extremely helpful source of information. So please take advantage of that if you can. With that related, even if you go to the campus visits, or even if you can't, please don't hesitate to just blindly email people in the department. I remember the first time I started going through this application process, I was very hesitant to email other grad students. I thought, oh, these people are so busy, they're so overwhelmed. Do not hesitate to just go to a department's website, click over to people and go to grad students and just highlight all of their emails and BCC all of them with your questions. And some of them will reply. Questions about the climate of the department. And if you've already made your decision, questions about what neighborhoods to live in, the possibilities of where you can live and so on. I remember when I got into Indiana, I just went to different departments' websites, not even just philosophy. And I just emailed every single grad student email that I saw and said, does anybody need a roommate or know someone who needs a roommate? And I got a place that I lived at for the entire duration I was at Indiana, just through that process. Even though grad school is stressful and our time is important, grad students are often very, very giving with their time. They very often will not just email with you, but also can talk to you over the phone or even Zoom with you to give you honest feedback about the departments that you're thinking of going to. The one other final thing I really want to mention is there are lots of different factors that you can keep in mind when making this decision, and you can't keep them all in your head. It's just too much. I encourage you to make, say, a spreadsheet with the different opportunities or offers you have, and then different columns about the different factors related to it. How much are the stipends? How livable is the environment? What types of people work there in your faculty that you might specialize with or have on your committee, and so on and so forth. But while you're doing that, also include a separate column just for your sort of gut feeling, right? All these different metrics can be quantified better or worse in terms of various considerations, but there's also a sense of just whether or not you think that this is the right place to go to. So always keep in mind the fact that this is a difficult decision, and it doesn't seem like there's a clear decision procedure, right, that will give you the right answer, or that there's a right weighting scheme of these different considerations. So always keep in mind the possibility that there's this sort of gut feeling or just instinctual response that you might have to whether or not your well-being and your success as an academic could be, encouraged in these particular programs. So I'll leave it there.
Oh, on this context, also I very much recommend Ro Chang's paper on hard choices. At least for me, when at some point I had to go back to like endorsing one of the options. It just becomes incommensurable. So I have a few questions here in the chat already. So we'll address them by order. So if I just like gave thumbs up to your question, that means that I saw it. So don't worry, we'll get to that. The first question is an anonymous question asking, are there any special guidelines, tips for foreign, specifically African applicants? I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe I'm the only international student here, but maybe you also have any insights. From my perspective, I found it very important to figure out what kind of visa I would be getting before accepting an offer. Specifically, there are two different types of visa that are available for international grad students, F and J. F is the most common one, but a disadvantage of F is that it doesn't allow your dependents to work, which for me was a very important thing so that my wife would have something to do while we are here. One of the programs that I was considering told me that they would try, but they couldn't, but they would not be able to promise anything. And the Temple actually said we guarantee that. I mean, that's of course not something that they can guarantee because that's something with the government, but they would make it work. And so I could go to Temple more confident that my wife would be able to work than with the other program that I had in mind. So yeah, visa questions are questions that are important to take into consideration. And also, if you're not already in the US, you can ask your department if they're not already including that in your offer for some kind of funding for your actually moving to the US. Usually departments have some kind of like donation fundings that they can allocate to different things. That's at least the case in my department. And so that's something that you can just try and ask. Worst case scenario, you get a no. But that's that can save you some very, very large money. So that's all I have to add. Do you guys have anything to add to this?
I have one thing to add. So this is mostly from looking at some of the websites for when folks are applying. I would say for folks that are international applicants, and I'm also thinking of a university that's also in Canada, some of them will explicitly on their website say, we are very limited in our ability to admit international applicants. And of course, what that reference point is going to mean depends on which country we're in. But for some international folks, it might be really worthwhile to reach out directly to the department and ensure that they are in fact accepting international applicants. Because during COVID, we also saw an increase in the number of universities that were not able to admit international applicants due to funding limitations. That has changed over the last few years based on some of the data stuff that I've been looking at. But there are still some universities where they will say on their applicant page, we can only admit one international applicant every year. Or some of them say, if you're international, you need to talk to us first. So that would be one thing I would potentially add. It does depend on the university, it does depend on the department, but that is something that has come up in the past for some of our applicants.
You're welcome. Thank you, Linds. Anyone else? Yes, I think.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I'll just add for like as a tip for international students that there are also federal restrictions on the amount that you can work, like the amount of hours you can work while enrolled as a student on a student visa. So that is something to keep in mind if you are relying on funding that is through a job. You can only work on campus. So that can also affect decisions.
That's very right. And also to add to that, so some programs, most programs don't have any funding for the summer. But at some programs, you do have some summer teaching available. And I think it's totally fine. That's something that I did in the past 2 years to ask my department and say, well, as an international student, I cannot work elsewhere. So if you have something for teaching in the summer, I would love to take that. At least from my experience, people took that into consideration. Okay, so next question. Here have more of a specific case. So also an anonymous question. They say, I'm choosing between two programs. Program A is more prestigious and has many professors who specialize in my area. And program B only has 1 or 2 professors who specialize in my interests, but is in a location I far prefer and has shown much more interest in having me attend, offering extra fellowship money, professors reaching out and asking if there's any way they can help me decide. When academic considerations come at odds with lifestyle considerations, how should this be balanced? I would be more excited about program B and living there for 5 to 6 years, but it feels foolish to have my interest in not attend to school A, given the option. Very good question. Anyone wants to start? Yes, Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. It took me a while.
Fine now. Yeah.
But yeah, I could say something about this. So in my brief remarks earlier, I mentioned that it might be a good thing to consider lifestyle factors more than people typically do. And the reason I said that is during my own decision process, I did not very heavily take lifestyle factors into account. But you are in a PhD program for a long time. It's generally 5 years at least. So you should consider, will I have opportunities to date people in this area where I'm going? Are there opportunities in this area for me to meet like-minded people who are not necessarily affiliated with the university, with whom I might be able to make friends? And it might not seem like a huge deal now, but 5 years is a long time. So that would be my advice. And I did sort of just go with the highest PGR ranked program during my own process. And sometimes, I mean, I live without regrets, obviously, but sometimes I look back and think maybe I should have considered the lifestyle factors a little more.
Thank you, Rachel. They're very important points. Anyone else?
So I can add just from my experience, when I applied to PhD programs, I had two offers that I was choosing between. So the UMass offer and the other was UC Irvine. I applied in epistemology, so both strong in epistemology. Both mid-ranked, and Irvine is, or at least at the time, was higher. But I ended up going with UMass, and there was like obviously a lot of factors that went into that, but mainly it was just I went to the UMass visit and I was like, this is it. This is where I belong. It just was the vibe that felt right. I had really good conversations with the other grad students there at my visit. I had really good conversations with professors, including the one who became my advisor. We talked for about 3 hours about my writing sample and just philosophy. So yeah, I will say that the visit for me was kind of the deciding factor, in addition to other things like for me, I was able to like live with family for most of my program, which obviously was a financial consideration that saved me a lot of money. So there's no like one size fits all answer to like this decision, but I think that those are some of the things that are important to think about.
Great. Thank you. Linds or Paul, you want to add something?
I think the only thing that I'm going to add is going to just be a reiteration and kind of support for what everybody else has said. When I think about some of the folks I've known that have kind of accepted specifically based on PGR ranking, I'm going to be transparent. A number of them are no longer pursuing their PhDs because they didn't find a community and a network in a space where they were able to be and bring their full authentic selves. And they didn't find the type of external to the department support that they were really looking for. So I wanted to share that because I've seen the impact that has had on at least some folks. Obviously, that is slightly conjecture. That is not going to apply or be representative of everybody who goes to very high ranking PGR things. And they have shared with me, though, that they wish they'd also considered some of those other components that for them would have allowed for more protective factors and better support based on their own social situatedness. And maybe things would have looked a little bit different than they do now. So I would reiterate, like really thinking about some of those other components, just because, yes, the other stuff also can be really, really important. And also, are you going to be supported, happy, healthy, and be able to be a full, authentic, well-rounded human being during a program? That can also matter a whole awful lot.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all the points that have been said so far about these things. I mean, one thing, the gourmet report has been mentioned multiple times by multiple people, but perhaps it's important to emphasize it only measures prestige. It only measures perceived prestige by working philosophers that have been polled. That's very explicit. It in no way measures whether or not, as people have pointed out, the sort of climate is conducive to graduate students doing well. It in no way measures, one's particular job placement, likelihood. The thing I mentioned previously, the APDA has a particular passage or section where it correlates prestige and to what extent it has an impact on job placement, but it's not one-to-one by any means. And a lot of the programs that one would view as sort of less prestigious on the gourmet report have extremely successful job placement. So take all these different considerations in mind, but a necessary condition, to use some philosopher jargon, for you succeeding in your program are the facts on the ground of how conducive the social and physical and economic environment is, the material conditions, So please don't just get blinded by the prestige consideration and only choose the particular program that you go to on the basis of its ranking on the gourmet report. There are lots of different considerations at play here. As I mentioned previously, there's no particular decision procedure or weighting scheme that is the right one. You need to introspect and figure out what is necessary for you to succeed in this endeavor, and try to find the particular circumstance that meets those particular conditions. So in addition to amassing all of the various data and the various considerations that are at present, you need to do some soul searching, right? Know yourself, know the kind of social environment that you do well at, know the kinds of hobbies that you spend your time doing when you're not doing philosophy that are in many ways essential for you to have the sort of clear mind on your other conscious hours to get good work done. I guess one final thing that I'll mention is getting through the program is often really important. At the same time, though, as we've mentioned, the job market prospects are not very good. I think people should only pursue academic philosophy in higher education, in grad school as well, insofar as one is at a point where if things went awry and you had to leave the program for whatever reason, you wouldn't be bitter. That you would look back on your time doing philosophy in an academic context as a valuable time in your life and not be annoyed at the choices that you made. So it is a long-term project. It is an important decision, and the job market is rough, but try to make the decision in an informed way and with enough self-knowledge that if something were to change in your life or your circumstance that you weren't able to finish the program, you wouldn't necessarily feel it as an extreme loss. We're valuable independently of our academic achievements, as Linds and other people have emphasized.
That's true. And also, I'd like to add a professional point. So in the school that I ended up not getting their offer, not taking their offer, there was one philosopher who I love her work, and we in our conversations after I got the offer, we had like this perfect match. But I had all these like personal considerations that made me taking a different decision, and I disclosed those considerations to her as I was declining the offer, and we actually continued to stay in touch, and she still gives me comments on my papers without like any obligations, just because we had a good philosophical match. So if you have like good people in the school that you do not want to go to, that's also fine and actually good to maintain contact with them, so for professional reasons. Okay, so next question. They say, I'm currently waitlisted in my dream program. The director told me it's unranked, but it's a large waitlist of 8 people, and it's the only program where I can be close to my partner. Now I'm desperately seeking advice on if there's anything I can do to improve my chances. I think maybe Shane and Linds have more experience on this kind of struggles. I have nothing to add here.
I can start. Yeah, that's a really tough position to be in, and there's not really anything you can do to improve your chances at this stage. The decision is what it is. They put you on the wait list. They put you in a position, or I guess if it's not ranked, then it gives you less information about your chances, and that's really frustrating. It is unfortunately part of this process a lot of the time. I think that like it's March 29th, we have until April 15th. 8 people is not actually that many people on a wait list to get through. I've definitely seen way longer ones. And depending, so I guess I'll say if it's like a top 10 PGR program, the chances are way less that you're gonna see movement like that. But in most cases, you have a good chance in the next couple of weeks of getting off that. And it is really important if you're still on the wait list, like the few days leading up to April 15th, to be in touch with them and say, I'm still interested. Please keep me posted. I've seen people have to be like on the phone with the graduate program director like on April 15th right up to the deadline to see if they got off the wait list, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, and that's it's a really frustrating and stressful time. But hopefully it works out for the best.
Cool. If no one wants to add anything, I'll go over to the next question. So two questions. First, and this one might be more directed to Paul since it's about Tufts May specifically. We're a short waitlist spot, almost guaranteeing April 15 game day decision. Second, I have an open house panel to go to for admitted and waitlisted students. What are the kinds of questions should I be asking to a larger group? How do I go about following up afterwards and continuing to express my interests? I don't want to seem desperate or pushy. I have other funded options. Do I mention this? So Paul, I think you can start.
Yeah, those are a few questions. So the first question about how likely the wait list moves at Tufts, I'm not sure. I imagine Linds or Shane might have actual data about these kinds of things. I'm not sure. When I got accepted to Tufts, I wasn't on the wait list. One thing that's important to mention, though, is that there are lots of different MA programs in philosophy, master's programs that are terminal in the sense that they don't have a PhD program, and Tufts is one of them. With that in mind, some of those MA programs are funded. Some of them are not. Those are extremely important considerations to keep in mind. How are you going to live if you go to these MA programs? MA programs play an important role in the discipline insofar as, for example, like me, you come from an undergraduate institution that no one has ever heard of. And prestige plays an important role in this process. MA programs can give you can be a stepping stone to try to gain access to some of these more prestigious schools, and also just to deepen your knowledge of philosophy, the kind of philosophy that one does coming out of an institution, an undergraduate institution that doesn't have a strong background in philosophy or prestige sense in philosophy is something to keep in mind. So funding is important. I would ask about that. Insofar as you can interact with people at Tufts or whatever MA program you're going to and get a sense of the climate, please do so. Please email them. And then also the funding consideration is extremely important. Do these people take out student loans to pay their living expenses? And where is this MA program based? Boston is an expensive place to live. And finding people to live with is an absolutely essential part of it. Were there other aspects of the question that I missed, Ellie?
Yeah, I think it was this large group, and they were asking specific questions that they should address to the large group.
Oh, so like if one goes to visit and is around like a large group of people involved with the department, like what questions you should ask? I'm not sure if there's anything in particular. I would say that the social context in which you ask particular questions is perhaps important. If you ask for questions just about, say, the climate and the interaction between professors in front of all of the professors, you'll get a certain answer. But if you're, hanging out at the bar later with a, second or third year grad student and you ask them, maybe you'll get a more honest answer. So asking the kinds of questions to particular people in particular contexts to try to maximize the honesty and the truthfulness of the answer is probably something to keep in mind. But there's nothing in particular that jumps to mind that you should ask when in front of the whole department or faculty in particular.
Generally speaking, of prioritized settings that you can get, I just don't find the larger settings to be fruitful for sincere questions, sincere answers. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can I just? Sorry.
Sure.
You go, Shane.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Paul was saying about unfunded master's programs, and I'm going to say something stronger, which is don't do an unfunded master's program. A lot of them are essentially just scams. They're predatory. They want your money and they're not going to support you. I'm not going to say that's the case universally, but there are a lot of programs like that at every level in every discipline now that are just this is a philosophy program in name only. Partially funded programs are more complicated. Tufts and Brandeis are a few examples. Tufts, like, I believe fully funds like a few people, but not everyone. Brandeis, when I was there, the fellowship covered about half of the tuition, and the stipend for TAing covered a few months' rent. And I was about $50,000 in debt when I came out of that. So was it worth it? I can't really say, but I did get, guidance and support in applying to PhD programs and got into a good one. So that's the consideration.
Could I say one sort of follow-up that just jumped to my mind about the funding consideration? When I went through the process of making the decision when I went to Tufts, I had no idea that the following was even a possibility, and maybe it's not. One of the people in my cohort, I was just, having a conversation with him maybe like half a year into the program, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I negotiated with them. I haggled with them to the extent of the funding that I got." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, well, I had multiple offers. Tufts was offering me a certain amount of funding, and these other places were offering me other kind of funding. So I went to Tufts and I said, hey, how about you increase the percentage of funding? And then maybe that'll make the offer more desirable to me." And he was able to do this. And the department gave him more funding. If you have multiple offers at this point or between now and when you need to make a decision, view it as leverage, view it as an opportunity to negotiate with these places. Some places, so for example, Madison, it's a state school. The amount of funding that the departments give is just sort of locked in by higher ups, and it's not negotiable. And oftentimes schools like that will be very clear saying, we're sorry, we can't give you more in terms of funding. But you are in a position, if you have multiple offers, to negotiate or at least try to sort of broach that conversation with people in the department.
Yeah, thank you.
And can I add two very quick things?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just we have quite a few other questions. I want to try to rush into them. So here's a suggestion. Let's try to have like one person for each question from now on. So whoever jumps in first takes the question. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that we can address as much as we can. So another question: if I'm not successful this year and they think the problem lies in the writing sample I provided, can I use the same recommendation saved via Interfolio to apply next year? It was really hard for me to secure the recommendations this time.
I can address that one very briefly. So it's going to depend on the department that you are applying to. Some of them allow Interfolio, some of them do not. As a type of letter submission thing, it does have the capacity to be able to store letters. However, it also depends on whether or not the letter that was submitted is intended for like potential future references as well. So it's going to depend on like the type of letter that was submitted, and it's going to depend on the settings of the university that you're applying to.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Next question: what are some red flags that I should be paying attention to when visiting a particular department and asking questions? For example, a program at university with serious financial problems, or faculty members not present at prospective visiting days. Rachel?
Yeah, I can say something about this. So I would look at the number of graduate students who are leaving the program every year, so the number who enter in a particular cohort versus the number who matriculate, I think is the term. If there is a large difference between those two numbers, you might want to ask around about why that's the case. And I think this is also just on the topic of getting sort of frank answers to your questions. It's good to talk to the stars of the program and the people who are highlighted on the admissions days, but it's also good to talk to some of the people who are not the stars and who might be struggling and not as happy about their position in the program. And that doesn't even have to be during an open house. You can, as someone mentioned, just email a bunch of the people in the department, and they'd probably be happy to talk to you. And it's usually better to do things over a phone or Skype conversation or Zoom than it is via text messaging these days. But yeah, I hope that it's helpful to answering that question.
That is for sure. Okay, let's go for the next one. Does applying to PhD programs in the US while currently enrolled in the PhD program in another country negatively impacts an applicant's perception during the admissions process? Is it necessary to explicitly explain why I'm choosing to leave my current program in favor of applying to a program in the US? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're already in a PhD program like I was, so I was in the HPS program at Indiana and I was doing applications again. I don't think it's essential that you mention the reason why, but insofar as the reason is something that is totally understandable. So, for example, my advisor was leaving and there wasn't anyone else in the department for me to work with. Mention that in your statement. So then the person looking at your CV and your application might think to themselves, well, this person's already in a program. Why are they leaving? Oh, here's this obvious reason. Just mention it in your cover letter, just a sentence or two. But I don't think that you need to spend terribly much time, whether or not you're applying or, as we sometimes say, transferring. You're doing the application process and your application materials are being evaluated amongst all the other applicants.
Should your writing samples be necessarily published? And can you submit part of your dissertation at the undergrad level as a writing sample? The short answer is no, it doesn't have to be published. And the fact that people are actually requiring or expecting people coming from undergrad to have published anything is so no, you don't have to have it published. I think you can submit pretty much everything that you consider a good work of philosophy, right? I mean, it would be good for it to be in the field that you are aspiring for, so that maybe the person that you want to work with can have some assessment of your level. But even that, I don't think it's necessary. Okay, let's see. Next question. Are there any limitations on employment for domestic students in your programs?
I can speak to that a little bit. So in terms of legally in the US, no. Some programs are going to be upset about you getting a second job outside of the department or outside of the university, and that is definitely, if that's like financially a need for you, that's something you should find out about before you attend that program. For where we are at UMass, we have a pretty strong graduate student labor union, and one of the many protections we have is for second jobs, so definitely something to keep track of.
Good, thank you. Moment. I think this will be like our last question for today. So I'm sorry for those who didn't get their questions. So does applying to PhD programs in the US while currently, no, sorry, we did this one. So I have another one over here. When putting in an application for MA or PhD in philosophy, is it necessary to indicate other certificates held in other fields, particularly when those certificates didn't come with honors or distinction?
I mean, I think when you're doing the application and you're including your CV, you should include all of your various, accomplishments, regardless of the discipline, especially if the discipline in question relates to some interdisciplinary work that you're going to do.
No.
Let's imagine you have a certificate in biology or something, or some sort of degree, even a lower level degree in terms of biology, and you want to do philosophy of biology, make sure to include that on your CV. So don't leave anything out in terms of your academic background when applying.
No.
Oftentimes,
sorry.
one thing I want to say is that oftentimes people are sort of hesitant to sort of like brag about themselves and their accomplishments. The application process is the time for you to do that. It's the time for you to present your CV in the most glowing way, to brag about your accomplishments in your cover letter, and also to encourage your letter writers to say positive things about you. So please don't be shy or hesitant to emphasize your accomplishments when you're doing this application process.
That's right. Wonderful. So I think we are finished for today. Before I hand over to Amy for some conclusive remarks, does anyone else want to add anything?
I will add one closing thing. So as folks are kind of in, obviously, the situatedness of having to choose between different programs or waiting to see how the grand waitlist shuffle will in fact shuffle. The shuffling will pick up soon. I do promise statistically it does. I would also invite folks to consider how for future applicants, we can also be supportive of them. So when you think about some of the barriers, the hiccups, and some of the things that just can unexpectedly occur when folks are in these admissions processes, there's opportunities as grad students to support other grad students in the future to try to lessen the bootstrapping, to try to lessen some of the barriers, the hiccups, and just some of the weird things that we just don't necessarily know are going to come up, to make their application seasons hopefully go a lot smoother than maybe some of ours have. And that's part of the stuff that a lot of the grad students here I'm seeing doing, trying to support one another because we're all in this together at the end, even if we're also slightly competing some of the time. And we can also make these changes to make sure that the future application seasons go at least better than some of our experiences may have been.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Linds. I'll thank again for Amy for enabling this event to happen in such a short notice. And thank you everyone, the panelists and the audience for joining us this Friday. I had a wonderful time. Amy.
Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Ellie, for facilitating such a valuable conversation, and to all of the panelists for your advice and guidance and insights for all of our attendees and everybody who's watching the recording after the fact. All of our panelists, as you can see on your screen, have generously shared their email addresses. So if you'd like to follow up with questions after the fact, you're welcome to do that, especially if your question wasn't answered during the time we had live today. You can also find out more about the APA Graduate Student Council at the URL on your screen. And search Facebook for the Philosophy Grad Applicant Facebook group. This is part of our APA online, or APA Live online event series, and you can find out about upcoming events at the URL on the screen, and you can suggest topics for future events on the other URL on your screen. And finally, if you like these events and want to see more of them, please support the APA by becoming a member, by getting involved, by making a donation, whatever is available to you. So we thank you very much for being part of this event today, for taking time out of your day to be part of the conversation. And we look forward to seeing you at future APA Live events. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you.